The AMP-mTOR method is a conceptual framework trademarked by Dr. Peter Morano. It is grounded in well-established biology and awaiting clinical trials. It is an evidence-informed, biologically plausible, and mechanistically coherent blueprint for adults wishing to age well into and throughout most of the marginal decade, those last 10 years of life. When you first see the AMP-mTOR method logo, you'll notice two symbols that seem very different at first glance. On the AMPK side, there's the face of an older man. On the mTOR side, there's a flexed arm, a classic symbol of strength. The contrast is intentional and captures the core idea behind the method. The face represents AMPK, which I think of as the body's repair and longevity pathway. The face is not meant to symbolize weakness or decline. It represents instead durability, the ability to survive, adapt, and remain metabolically resilient across decades and into old age, and the so-called marginal decade. The other image in the logo, that of the flexed arm, represents mTOR, the body's growth and strength pathway. Many people pursue, either intentionally or by chance, one of these goals at the expense of the other, either longevity without strength or strength without regard for longevity or long-term metabolic health. The AMPK-mTOR method is built on a different premise. The goal is not to choose between repair and growth or longevity and strength. The goal is to alternate between them deliberately. Repair, then build, then repair, so that the biology that keeps us alive longer and stronger work together in harmony. The rhythm is that the logo is representing, and that rhythm is the foundation of my AMPK-mTOR method. The diagram here shows the two major biological pathways that govern how our bodies adapt over time as we age. AMPK, which we will call the repair mode, and mTOR, which is the growth mode. Think of these not as good versus bad, but as two essential systems that the body runs at different times, depending on the signals it receives. The words upstream and downstream may be somewhat unfamiliar. Upstream simply means the signals that come first, the inputs that the body senses, such as food, exercise, or energy availability. Upstream signals are the inputs that were mentioned, including exercise type and protein intake, determining whether AMPK or mTOR will be engaged. When either of these pathways is turned on, the term is then upregulated, which means to increase the activity or expression of a biological pathway or process, such as enhancing AMPK-driven repair mechanisms, or stimulating mTOR-mediated muscle protein synthesis. The opposite of upregulate is downregulate, which means to reduce the activity or expression of a biological pathway or process, such as suppressing mTOR signaling during AMPK-focused repair phases, or suppressing AMPK signaling during mTOR-focused build phases. Now, downstream refers to the effects that ripple through the body once a pathway is turned on. Downstream effects are the biological outcomes or consequences that follow pathway activation, such as mitochondrial repair, fat oxidation, or muscle protein synthesis, depending on which pathway is being activated, AMPK or mTOR. With this in mind, the diagram shows the two major biological pathways that shape how our body adapts over time. So we're talking about adaptations. And AMPK, again, functions as the repair mode, and mTOR functions as the growth mode. Let's get into some of the details, starting with AMPK. Now, AMPK turns on when the body senses scarcity. That means energy is relatively low. And I don't necessarily mean how energetic you feel when you wake up in the morning. I'm referring more to ATP energy. The signals that trigger it include fasting or time-restricted eating, low insulin levels, and aerobic training like Zone 2 exercising. These are all situations where the body shifts into efficiency and conservation. Now, once AMPK is activated, a cascade of effects follows. The cells initiate autophagy, its internal cleanup and recycling system. Fat oxidation increases, meaning stored fat is used more readily for energy. Mitochondrial function improves, making cells more efficient at producing energy, and insulin sensitivity also improves. And at the same time, mTOR activity is intentionally dialed down. The body is prioritizing repair, renewal, and long-term resilience. Now let's move on to the right side, mTOR. mTOR activates when the body senses abundance, such as an abundance of nutrients from food. Signals that turn it on include adequate protein intake, especially the amino acid leucine, but also resistance training, lifting weights, creatine, carbohydrates, and insulin, and overall energy availability. These signal to the body that resources are present and it's time to build. When mTOR is active, the body shifts into construction mode. Muscle protein synthesis increases. Strength and muscle size improve. Bone and connective tissue are maintained. Growth factors increase. And at the same time, autophagy is reduced, not because it's unimportant, but because the body has temporarily shifted its priorities from cleanup to growth. Now, the most important idea of all, I think, is at the bottom of the diagram, and it looks like a simple statement of back and forth rhythm, which means keep AMPK and mTOR signaling as distinct as possible because mixing them compromises their effectiveness. Signaling becomes blurry. And as we age, blurry signals tend to produce weaker results per unit of effort because recovery capacity and anabolic sensitivity are both lower. Let me speak a bit more on this because it's so important. When you do a hard endurance-style stimulus, which is an AMPK signal, and I'm talking long cardio, fasting, big energy deficit, and then you try to layer on a strong growth stimulus, which is an mTOR signal, such as heavy lifting, high protein intake, insulin, nutrient abundance, in the same window, you're asking the body to run two opposing priorities at the same time. AMPK is essentially saying energy is scarce, so conserve, clean up, become efficient. While mTOR is saying resources are available, build, synthesize, and grow. Now, in younger people, the body can sometimes tolerate that overlap and still adapt fairly well. But with age, the signal-to-noise ratio, as it were, gets worse. Muscle protein synthesis becomes harder to stimulate, inflammation is easier to provoke, and recovery just takes longer. So mixed days can leave you feeling like you did a lot, but provide you with only very modest gains in either direction. And exercise science actually taught us this lesson long before most people had ever heard of AMPK or mTOR. For decades, researchers studied what they called concurrent training, and that's performing endurance and strength training together, and they consistently found an interference effect when large amounts of endurance work were combined with resistance training in the same window. Strength and muscle gains were often smaller than expected. At first, this was blamed on fatigue or recovery effects, but we know now the deeper reason. The signals themselves compete. Endurance-style exercise strongly activates AMPK, which tells the body energy is limited and efficiency matters. Strength training and adequate nutrition activate mTOR, which tells the body resources are available and it's time to build. These pathways communicate with each other. There's a process called crosstalk. And AMPK can partially suppress mTOR when both are triggered close together. In younger people, this interference is often modest, but with aging, anabolic sensitivity declines, recovery becomes slower, and mixed signals become more costly. The AMPK-mTOR method applies this lesson deliberately. Instead of mixing repair and growth signals on the same day, it separates them in time, dedicating some days to repair and metabolic health and others to building strength. Past midlife, clearer signals like this produce better adaptation with less wear and tear, and that should be our goal. This means we get a better return for our efforts without the blunting that is seen with concurrent training. In closing, I wish to emphasize that healthy aging doesn't come from staying in either repair mode or build mode all the time. It comes from deliberately alternating between them, repair then build, repair and build. The biological rhythm that I'm expressing here is what allows us to remain strong, metabolically healthy, and resilient as we age. Thank you for your time and your interest in aging deliberately, not passively. Aging well isn't about choosing strength or longevity. It's about learning how to support both of them. And in the end, we have a much better chance of achieving both durability and capability in our advanced years in place of frailty.